One morning, I stood at my window, coffee in hand, watching as the world outside my home came to life. Birds chirped, the breeze stirred the trees, and the neighbor across the street, well, let's just say he was busy doing what he does best, prying into someone else's business. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed. His curiosity, relentless and uninvited, felt like it seeped through the walls of every house in the neighborhood. And it got me thinking, how many of us have neighbors who don't just live next door, but live in our lives? Or worse, disrupt our peace in ways we didn't even realize until it's too late. Here's the truth. Your neighbors can make or break the sanctuary of your home. So, let me ask you this. Are the people living closest to you adding value to your life, or quietly draining it away? Today, we're diving deep into a topic most of us don't talk about but all of us experience: how to handle the types of neighbors who threaten your peace of mind. With lessons rooted in Stoic philosophy and backed by science, you'll learn how to reclaim your space and safeguard your tranquility. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official. Together, let's build a community where wisdom meets action. Let's get started. Number 1. The intrusive gossip. You know the type. He's the neighbor who always seems to know more about your life than you do. You come home from work, and before you even step inside, there he is, leaning over the fence, asking questions that seem innocent enough at first. "Oh, did you have guests over last night? Or I noticed you're getting some renovations done. Must be expensive." But somehow, every detail you share becomes fuel for the neighborhood rumor mill. A woman once told me how her seemingly friendly neighbor turned her life upside down. She'd shared a casual comment about her plans to sell her home. Within days, the entire neighborhood was abuzz with twisted versions of her story. She found herself dodging unsolicited advice, prying questions, and even a few uninvited suggestions about her next move. Her sanctuary, the one place meant to be safe, felt violated. Stoics remind us to focus on what we can control. In this case, it's not the gossip, but how much access we allow others to our private lives. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The key is creating boundaries, not walls. So what can you do when faced with someone like this? First, learn to keep conversations light and neutral. Discuss the weather, local events, or anything that doesn't reveal too much about your personal life. When questions start to cross the line, politely steer the conversation elsewhere. If he asks, "Where did you get that new car?" try responding with a smile. "Oh, it was a practical decision." Keep it vague, keep it kind. Second, set physical boundaries. Don't be afraid to excuse yourself from overly chatty encounters. Say something like, "I've got a call to make, catch up later." Over time, they'll learn that your time isn't theirs to intrude upon. Finally, remember that distance doesn't mean disrespect. Establishing boundaries protects your peace without alienating others. When you act with kindness, but firmness, you show that your life isn't a public bulletin board. Let me ask you this. How much of your stress comes from the words of others? And how much could you ease it by limiting their access to your thoughts and actions? Stoicism teaches us that privacy is a form of freedom. By managing what we share and with whom, we reclaim control over our lives. So the next time someone leans in a little too close with questions that feel more like interrogations, ask yourself, what's worth sharing and what isn't? Because at the end of the day, your peace isn't just valuable, it's priceless. Number 2. The digital spy. Let's face it, the digital age has brought neighbors closer than ever before. Sometimes, too close. You might think the walls of your home and the boundaries of your Wi-Fi protect your privacy, but some neighbors seem to treat your online life as their personal entertainment channel. There's a man I know who found this out the hard way. He'd posted a photo of his new backyard renovation on social media, proud of the work he'd done. The next morning, his neighbor approached him, not to admire the work in person, but to comment on the post, complete with likes, tags, and a sprinkling of unsolicited advice. From there, the questions started piling up. How much did it cost? Who did you hire? Are you planning to host a party? It's funny how quickly your social media feed can become your neighbor's gossip column. But here's the Stoic truth. While you can't control who sees your posts, you can absolutely control how much you share. Epictetus wisely said, "Keep silence for the most part, and speak only when you must." Online, that translates to curating what you make visible and deciding who gets to see it. Start by adjusting your privacy settings. Social platforms today make it easy to limit who can view your content. Do you really need every neighbor in your friends list? Or would trimming it down protect your peace? When you post, think, am I sharing this for connection, or am I opening a window for unnecessary questions? When it comes to digital spies, even casual interactions can require boundaries. If someone starts prying into your posts, respond politely but firmly. You might say, "Thanks for noticing, but I prefer to keep those details private." Keep it light. Most people won't press further when you set the tone early. Of course, there's always the one who can't resist making your life their next trending topic. If they spread your information without permission, resist the urge to confront them emotionally. Instead, channel your inner Stoic. Marcus Aurelius taught us to bear in mind that others act out of their own ignorance. A calm but direct conversation can often stop the behavior. Now let me ask, how many times have you felt anxious after realizing you've shared too much online? And how much could you protect your peace by filtering not just your followers, but your thoughts before they become posts? Your online presence is an extension of your life. Treat it as a sacred space, guarded with the same care you give your home. The next time you upload a photo or share a status, pause and reflect. Who really needs to see this? Because when it comes to digital spies, the less they know, the quieter your world becomes. Number 3. The noisy neighbor. There's something about peace and quiet that makes a home feel like a sanctuary. But what happens when your neighbor's version of good vibes comes with pounding bass lines at midnight or the relentless roar of a lawnmower before dawn? Noise is one of those intrusions that doesn't just invade your ears, it rattles your nerves, disrupts your sleep, and steals the serenity you work so hard to maintain. I once knew a man who moved into a house he thought was perfect. Everything seemed right until the neighbor next door turned the volume up. Late-night karaoke and weekend parties spilled into Monday mornings. It felt like the noise was deliberately timed to make his life miserable. No matter how much he tried to block it out, the chaos seeped through the walls, leaving him irritable and exhausted. Noise doesn't just affect your mood, it can harm your health. Studies show that chronic exposure to loud sounds can lead to increased stress levels, high blood pressure, and even trouble concentrating. Seneca once said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which depends on the morrow and wastes the present." In this case, the morrow you're longing for is a quiet one, but it's slipping away. So, how do you deal with a noisy neighbor without escalating tensions? Start with diplomacy. Sometimes, people aren't even aware their actions are disruptive. Knock on their door and approach the topic calmly. "I wanted to chat about the music last night. It was a bit hard for me to sleep. Do you think we could find a time that works better for everyone?" Often, kindness opens doors to cooperation, but not all neighbors respond to polite requests. If noise continues to disrupt your life, it's time to invest in solutions for your own peace. Soundproofing your home might seem like an extreme measure, but it can create a haven of quiet, no matter what's happening outside. Simple changes like heavy curtains, rugs, or noise-canceling devices can make a big difference. And if all else fails, don't hesitate to involve a third party. Community associations, property managers, or local authorities are there to help resolve conflicts that impact the well-being of everyone in the neighborhood. Sometimes, enforcing boundaries requires more than words. Let me ask you, how much of your day is spent yearning for silence that never comes? And what would it feel like to reclaim the peace your home is meant to provide? Stoicism teaches us that while we can't control others, we can control our responses. Noise is temporary, but your peace doesn't have to be. Take the steps you need to protect it, because when the world outside feels chaotic, your home should be your refuge. Number 4, the competitor neighbor. It starts subtly. Your neighbor gets a new car, and within days they're telling you about its horsepower, the leather seats, and the high-tech dashboard. Next thing you know, they're eyeing your driveway, commenting on how practical your car looks. Before long, it's not just the cars. Their lawn has to look greener, their holiday lights brighter, their grill shinier. Suddenly, it feels less like a neighborhood and more like a competition you never signed up for. A man once told me about his neighbor who turned every interaction into a comparison. If he bought a modest new shed, the neighbor added a gazebo. If he mentioned his plans for a small garden, the neighbor hired a landscaper to install a fountain. It didn't take long for this rivalry to overshadow any chance of a friendly relationship. Why do some people feel the need to compete in this way? Psychology tells us it often stems from insecurity, a way of masking their own doubts by outdoing others. Stoics, on the other hand, teach us not to waste energy on comparisons. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The focus should always be on improving yourself, not outdoing others. So, how do you handle a neighbor like this? The first step is recognizing that their behavior isn't about you. Deflect competitive remarks with humor or neutral responses. If they comment on your car, try saying, "It gets me where I need to go. That's all I need." By not engaging in their game, you take away their power to escalate it. Another approach is to shift the narrative. Instead of letting competition define the relationship, encourage collaboration. For instance, if they brag about their landscaping, invite them to share tips for improving your garden. This simple gesture can transform rivalry into camaraderie, or at the very least, soften the tension. And most importantly, focus on your own contentment. Ask yourself, am I satisfied with what I have, or am I letting others dictate my happiness? Stoicism reminds us to find joy in what is essential, not in what is flashy. True fulfillment doesn't come from keeping up with the Joneses. It comes from appreciating what serves your values and your peace. Now, let me ask you, how often do you catch yourself comparing your life to someone else's? And how much freer would you feel if you let those comparisons go? Life isn't a contest, and your neighborhood isn't a race. When you choose to rise above petty rivalries, you protect not just your peace, but your integrity. Remember, the best competition is with yourself, striving to be better today than you were yesterday. What could be more fulfilling than that? Number 5. The overly demanding neighbor. There's always that one neighbor who turns your goodwill into their personal convenience store. It starts innocently enough, watering their plants while they're on vacation, picking up a package, or lending a tool. But soon, the requests pile up, and you realize you've become their go-to problem solver for everything they don't want to handle themselves. I remember a woman who lived next to a neighbor like this. At first, she didn't mind helping out, watching their dog for a weekend, lending her a ladder. But as time went on, the requests grew bolder. He'd ask her to mow his lawn while he was home or babysit his kids with little notice. The final straw came when he handed her a list of groceries to pick up because he didn't feel like going out. Why do some neighbors feel entitled to this level of help? Often, it's because boundaries were never set. They assume that if you've said yes once, you'll keep saying yes. But as Stoics remind us, true kindness is balanced by wisdom. Seneca wrote, "He who receives a benefit with gratitude repays the first installment on his debt." Helping should never feel like an obligation, and gratitude should flow both ways. So how do you navigate this delicate situation? Start by evaluating the request. Is it reasonable, or does it place unnecessary strain on your time and resources? For simple requests that don't disrupt your life, helping out can be neighborly. But for larger or recurring favors, it's perfectly acceptable to set limits. The key is learning to say no with kindness, but with firmness. If a neighbor asks for something unreasonable, you could respond with, "I'm sorry, I can't help this time." No need to over-explain or feel guilty. Your time and energy are valuable. Another approach is to redirect their requests. If they ask you to watch their house while they're away, suggest they hire a professional or ask someone else in the community. It's a subtle way of signaling that your willingness to help has limits without damaging the relationship. Here's something to think about. How often do we say yes out of fear of being perceived as unfriendly? And how much stress could we avoid if we simply respected our own boundaries? Stoicism teaches us to act with intention, not obligation. Helping a neighbor should bring joy, not resentment. The next time someone leans on you too heavily, ask yourself, is this kindness or is it enabling? By protecting your time, you ensure that when you do say yes, it comes from a place of genuine generosity, not burnout. Remember, true harmony in a neighborhood comes from mutual respect, not one-sided favors. And isn't that the kind of community we all want to live in? Number 6, the uncaring neighbor. We've all seen it. A house on the block that seems to drag down the entire neighborhood. Overgrown lawns, peeling paint, trash left out for days. It's not just an eyesore, it sends a message. And when that house belongs to your neighbor, the frustration can build. It's not just about appearances, it's about respect for the community everyone shares. There was a man who had a neighbor like this. She'd leave her garbage cans overflowing by the curb, even when it wasn't trash day. Her backyard fence leaned precariously, threatening to collapse into his garden. He tried to ignore it, but every time he pulled into his driveway, the mess felt like a personal affront. The longer it went on, the more it bothered him, not just because of how it looked, but because it felt inconsiderate. This kind of behavior often stems from neglect, laziness, or even a lack of awareness. But here's where Stoic philosophy comes in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul." In other words, while you can't control their actions, you can control how you respond. So what's the best way to handle an uncaring neighbor? Start with communication. Sometimes a simple conversation can open their eyes to the impact their neglect has on others. Approach them with respect and curiosity rather than accusation. For instance, "I've noticed the fence looks a little unstable. Do you need any help getting it fixed?" This frames the issue as a shared concern, making them more likely to take action. If direct communication doesn't work, consider enlisting help from your local community. Homeowners associations or neighborhood groups can address broader issues collectively, applying gentle pressure without making it personal. After all, people often respond better to a group request than an individual complaint. But what if they still won't budge? That's when you focus on what you can control. Maintain your own property as a source of pride and peace. Create a visual or physical barrier, like planting hedges, to reduce the impact of their neglect on your view. These small steps help protect your sanctuary while minimizing stress. Here's something to reflect on. How often do we let someone else's actions take up space in our minds? And how much energy could we save by focusing on solutions rather than frustrations? Stoicism teaches us to prioritize our peace over external chaos. By addressing issues thoughtfully and taking proactive steps, you can maintain harmony in your own life, even when others fall short. So ask yourself, what's worth your attention and what isn't? Because when it comes to uncaring neighbors, your well-being is always within your control. Number 7, the overly reclusive neighbor. You see them every so often, a shadow passing behind their curtains, a car pulling into the driveway before the garage door closes. They don't wave, they don't chat, and they don't show up at community events. The overly reclusive neighbor seems harmless at first glance, but their distance can create challenges of its own, especially when emergencies or shared responsibilities arise. A woman once lived next to such a neighbor. For months, she tried to make small talk. A wave here, a cheerful good morning there. Nothing worked. Then one winter, a tree fell across their shared fence after a storm. While she tried to figure out what to do, he stayed silent, making no effort to engage or address the issue. It left her feeling frustrated and isolated, as though the responsibility was hers alone. Stoic philosophy teaches us to approach these situations with patience and understanding. Epictetus said, "First, learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." Perhaps that reclusive neighbor isn't trying to be difficult. They may value solitude or struggle with social anxiety. Understanding this helps us approach them with empathy rather than frustration. So, how do you bridge the gap with a neighbor who keeps to themselves? Start small. A simple wave or nod in passing can open the door to communication without overwhelming them. If they seem receptive, take it a step further. Mention a shared interest like neighborhood safety or a local event. The goal isn't to force a connection, but to establish a minimal line of communication. But what if they remain unresponsive? That's when it's important to set your expectations. Not everyone is meant to be a friend, and that's okay. As long as they aren't disrupting your peace, respecting their boundaries is often the best course of action. If their reclusiveness becomes problematic, for instance, if shared responsibilities are ignored, approach the situation with diplomacy. Frame your concerns around shared interests, such as, "I noticed the fallen tree on the fence. Would you like to work together to address it?" This shows respect while encouraging collaboration. Here's something to think about. How often do we take silence as rejection when it might simply be someone's way of seeking peace? And how much better would our relationships be if we let go of expectations and met people where they are? Stoicism reminds us that we can't control others' behavior, but we can control how we interpret it. Your overly reclusive neighbor might never become a close ally, but by respecting their space and maintaining a friendly openness, you create an environment of mutual understanding. Ask yourself, what's more important, forcing a connection or preserving your own peace? Because sometimes the best relationships are built on quiet respect, not constant interaction. As we've explored, neighbors can shape our lives in more ways than we might realize. From the intrusive gossip to the overly reclusive, each type brings its own challenges. But with a little patience, some well-placed boundaries, and the wisdom of Stoicism, we can navigate these relationships without losing our peace of mind. Remember, the goal isn't to control others. It's to manage how we respond. Whether it's the digital spies scrolling through your life, the noisy neighbor disrupting your evenings, or the demanding neighbor always asking for favors, the power to protect your space lies in your hands. When you practice these lessons consistently, you'll find a balance that brings clarity and harmony to your daily interactions. Now, take a moment to reflect. How can you apply these principles to create a neighborhood that feels like a sanctuary, not a source of stress? And what small step could you take today to reclaim control over your environment? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you faced any of these challenges? How did you handle them? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might be just what someone else needs to hear. If you found value in this discussion, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stoic Narratives Official. Together we're building a community grounded in wisdom, resilience, and shared support. Thank you for watching, and here's to living with peace and purpose, one neighbor at a time.